Disclaimer: this story is based on true events and is intended for mature audiences. It includes themes of family, secrets, and emotional conflict. Viewer discretion is advised. That night with my grandfather changed everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the people closest to me. I was 17, just a few weeks away from heading off to college. Life felt simple, predictable even. My parents were away for the weekend, and I had agreed to stay with my grandfather at his old countryside house, just to keep him company. It was supposed to be a quiet, peaceful few days. I had no idea that one conversation, one unexpected moment, would flip my entire understanding of my family upside down. My grandfather had always been the calm, composed figure in our lives. He was the kind of man who spoke less, but when he did, people listened. A retired school principal, respected by everyone, known for his old-school values and gentle nature. Growing up, I always admired him. He and my grandmother had been together for over 50 years, at least, that's what I believed. They seemed like the perfect couple. But that night, I learned that even the people we place on pedestals have their shadows. It started off normally. We had dinner together, just the two of us. He made his usual jokes about how I was finally taller than him, and I helped him wash the dishes afterward. It was almost too quiet in the house. The kind of quiet that makes your thoughts louder. Around 10 p.m., we sat in the living room, and he turned off the TV after a while. Then, out of nowhere, he looked at me and said, "There's something I've never told anyone, not even your mother." At first, I laughed it off, thinking it would be another one of his funny war stories or something from his youth. But the way he looked at me serious, almost scared, I could feel my stomach tighten. He took a long pause, then asked me, "Do you believe that one mistake can follow your entire life?" I didn't know what to say. I nodded. And that's when he began to tell me the story. A story about a woman he met many years ago. Not my grandmother. A woman who came into his life at a time when he and my grandmother were going through something he called a silent storm. They never fought loudly, but he said there was a growing distance between them, like they were in the same room but living in different worlds. This other woman, he said, made him feel seen again. She reminded him of who he used to be, before responsibilities, before routine. The way he described her, it wasn't lust. It wasn't even excitement. It was sadness. Regret. He talked about the choices we make in moments of weakness and how they can echo through decades. He told me that he had never shared this part of his life with anyone, not even my grandmother. And yet, that night, he chose me. His grandson. The youngest in the family. Maybe because he saw the world changing, or maybe because he knew his time was getting shorter, and he couldn't carry this secret anymore. I sat there frozen. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but I couldn't even find the words. Everything I thought I knew about love, about loyalty, about my own family's history, it all suddenly felt uncertain. He didn't go into detail, and I didn't ask. It felt like if I said too much, the fragile honesty in the room might break apart. But then, he said something that chilled me. "She reached out again," he whispered. "Just last week." My heart stopped. I stared at him, waiting for him to explain. But he didn't. He just looked down at his hands, his fingers trembling slightly. The room went completely quiet again, only the sound of the old clock ticking on the wall. That night didn't end with answers. It ended with more questions than I knew how to handle. And what happened the next morning? Well, that changed everything. Not just for me, but for our entire family. What do you do when the person you admire the most reveals something you wish you never knew? And what if the past isn't finished yet? Stay with me, because the real story is only just beginning. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my grandfather's words echoed in my head. She reached out again. I kept wondering who this woman was, what she wanted now, and why, after all these years, she had suddenly come back into his life. Was it just a message? A phone call? Or had they actually met? The questions wouldn't stop. I could hear the floor creaking as he paced in the hallway around 3 a.m., and I didn't have the courage to get up and ask him anything more. It felt like I had entered a part of his life that I wasn't supposed to see. The next morning, everything looked normal, too normal. He was up early, making tea like nothing had happened. When I walked into the kitchen, he gave me a warm smile and asked if I wanted toast. It felt strange. The man who had opened up about one of the biggest secrets of his life just hours ago was now acting like we'd talked about the weather. I tried to bring it up gently, but he brushed it off. "We all make mistakes, son," he said, pouring tea into a cup. "Sometimes, the past doesn't stay buried." That's all. That was not all. I knew there was more. I could see it in his eyes. That wasn't just regret anymore, it was worry. Something was happening, and he was keeping it to himself. I spent most of that day walking around the property thinking. Their house was full of old photos, family trips, birthdays, wedding pictures of my grandparents when they were young. I stood in front of one frame for a long time. It was black and white, a picture of my grandfather holding my mom as a baby, with my grandmother standing beside him, smiling so gently. They looked like the definition of a perfect family. I couldn't stop wondering if that photo had been taken before or after that woman came into his life. Later that evening, I asked him directly if he still talked to her. He didn't answer right away. He just sighed and looked out the window, watching the wind sway the tall trees behind the backyard. "She sent a letter," he finally said, barely above a whisper. "It came last week. I didn't know what to do with it." A letter. In this age of texts and emails, she sent a letter. That somehow made it feel even more real and more serious. I asked if I could see it. He shook his head slowly. "No, not yet. I'm still trying to understand what she wants." That answer told me everything and nothing at the same time. It wasn't just an old flame trying to reconnect. It was something deeper, maybe a secret he thought would never come out. And now it was clawing its way back into his life. I wondered if my grandmother ever suspected anything. She passed away 5 years ago, and in all that time, I had never seen my grandfather cry until the night of her funeral. He wept alone, sitting by her casket after everyone had gone home. I remember thinking then how deep their bond must have been. But now I was forced to question everything. What if part of his grief wasn't just about losing her, but about what he had never told her? He didn't bring the letter up again, and I didn't push. But that night, I heard something strange. I was in the guest room, reading, when I heard the front door creak open. I checked the time. It was almost midnight. I peeked through the curtains, and I saw him. My grandfather, standing outside under the porch light, holding something in his hand. It looked like a photograph. He stood there for almost 10 minutes, staring out into the dark, before quietly coming back inside. He didn't know I had seen him. Something was building. I could feel it. This wasn't just an old man reflecting on his past. This was a secret that hadn't finished writing itself. And whatever was in that letter, whatever this woman wanted, it was about to stir up something none of us were ready for. And the worst part? I had no idea how deep it went, or how much it would eventually change me too. The next day, I tried to carry on like normal, but everything fell off. Every word my grandfather said, every quiet moment, I kept reading into it, trying to figure out what was going on behind that calm face. I knew he was hiding something bigger than just a letter from the past. It wasn't just guilt anymore. It was fear. And I started to wonder, was it fear of being found out? Or fear of what this woman might bring with her now? By the afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. While he was out watering the plants in the garden, I went into his study. I wasn't proud of it, but I had to know more. The letter, the photograph, the sudden silence. I opened the bottom drawer of his desk, the one he always kept locked. To my surprise, it wasn't locked this time. Inside were old papers, notes, and a small brown envelope. I didn't open it. I froze when I saw my name on the front, written in a shaky but familiar handwriting. Why would a letter addressed to me be hidden in his drawer? Before I could take it out, I heard the screen door creak. I slammed the drawer shut and walked out like nothing had happened. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did, and just didn't say anything. That evening, we both pretended everything was normal again. But I noticed something new. His phone kept buzzing. He never looked at it in front of me, but I could see the tension on his face every time it lit up. I caught a glimpse of a name once. Just the letter E. That's all it said. Could she be the one behind all of this? Was she texting him now? At dinner, I finally asked, "Did you love her?" He didn't look up from his plate. He just said, "I loved your grandmother more." That didn't really answer my question. I wondered if anyone else in the family knew. My mom always said her parents had their silent phases, but nothing ever seemed serious enough to guess there had been someone else involved. Was this woman someone they all thought had disappeared long ago? Or worse, what if she never really left? Later that night, while scrolling through an old photo album, I noticed something odd. There was a picture I'd never seen before, hidden behind another one in the back sleeve. It was a younger version of my grandfather, sitting on a park bench with a woman I didn't recognize. She wasn't my grandmother. Her smile looked familiar in a strange way, like I'd seen it before, just couldn't place where. On the back of the photo, in small writing, it said, Eleanor, summer of '76. Eleanor. The same name I'd seen partially on his phone. Something was unfolding and fast. A past affair wasn't just creeping back in, it felt like it was starting to overlap with the present. And now it was pulling me into it, too. I kept thinking about the letter in that drawer. Why would my grandfather have a letter meant for me, hidden and unread? What was in it that I wasn't supposed to know yet? I knew I couldn't keep pretending I was just a guest in this story anymore. I was part of it now, whether I wanted to be or not. I couldn't stop thinking about that letter with my name on it. Every time I passed by a study, I felt it calling to me. Whatever was inside it, I knew it had the power to shift everything. But I waited. I told myself I'd give him the chance to explain first, to come clean on his own. Days passed, and nothing. He carried on like nothing had changed, like he hadn't opened up to me that night, or shown me a side of himself that I never knew existed. Then, one evening, everything shifted. We were sitting outside after dinner, watching the sun go down behind the hills. The air was still, almost too quiet. That's when he said, without looking at me, "She wants to meet you." I turned toward him slowly, not sure if I heard him right. "Who?" He didn't answer directly. He just said, "She says she deserves to speak her truth." Those words chilled me. I asked him why. Why would this woman want to meet me? What did I have to do with any of this? He looked straight ahead and said, "Because you remind her of someone." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I stayed still. My mind was racing. Did this mean she had a child? My grandfather's child? Did I have an aunt, an uncle, someone out there we never knew about? That night, I couldn't take it anymore. After he went to bed, I went into the study and took the letter. My hands were shaking. I opened the envelope slowly, like I was peeling back a layer of my own history. It wasn't long, just a page. But every line hit like a hammer. She spoke about their time together, about the pain of being left behind, about a decision made in silence, one that affected more than just the two of them. And at the end, she wrote, "He deserves to know. And he deserves the truth from both of us." I didn't know what to think. I stared at that sentence for a long time. The next morning, I confronted him. I held up the letter and asked, "Is it true? Am I who she's talking about?" He looked like he'd aged 10 years in a second. His eyes welled up, but he said nothing. Then, a knock came at the door. 3 slow, firm knocks. He didn't move. He just stared at the floor. I walked to the door, heart pounding. I didn't know who I was about to see. I didn't know what truth was waiting on the other side. But I knew one thing, nothing after this would ever be the same again. I opened the door slowly, expecting to see a stranger, Eleanor, the woman who had somehow shaken everything I thought I knew about my grandfather. But it wasn't her. It was a man. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, and a serious expression. He looked at me like he already knew who I was. "Is Henry here?" he asked, using my grandfather's first name like he'd known him for years. I nodded slowly, still trying to process. Before I could even ask who he was, my grandfather appeared behind me. And the second he saw the man, something in his face collapsed. He didn't speak, didn't move. The air between them was thick with something I couldn't name, shock, maybe guilt, maybe both. The man's voice was calm, but heavy. "You didn't think I'd ever show up, did you?" I looked between the two of them, heart racing. "Who is he?" I asked. My grandfather finally whispered, "His name is Daniel." Daniel stepped forward. "I'm his son." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. His son. Not my uncle. Not some distant relative. His secret son. From Eleanor. Everything started spinning in my head, my grandfather's silence, the hidden letter, the request to meet. It wasn't just about a past affair. It was about a life he had hidden. A person. Daniel looked at me with a strange mix of curiosity and sadness. "And you're my nephew, I guess." I couldn't respond. My whole body felt frozen. Then Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something, a folded document. "This isn't just a reunion," he said. "I'm here because she's dying. And she asked me to deliver this myself." He handed it to my grandfather, who didn't take it. He just stared at it. I didn't know what was inside, but from the way he reacted, I knew it wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about everything coming undone. My grandfather finally took the folded document from Daniel's hand. His fingers trembled as he opened it, his eyes scanning each line like they were knives. For a long moment, there was silence, just the sound of the clock ticking behind us. Then he looked up, eyes glassy, and said in a voice barely louder than a whisper, "She left everything. To you." Daniel didn't flinch. She said it was her way of making peace. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Eleanor was dying. And she had written my grandfather out of her final wishes, her house, her letters, everything, left to the son he never publicly claimed. My grandfather sat down slowly, shoulders heavy, like the weight of every decision he ever made had just landed all at once. That should have been the end of it, the big reveal, the fallout, the emotional closure. But then Daniel turned to me. "She also asked me to give you this," he said, reaching into his bag and pulling out a small, sealed envelope. I opened it, expecting more of the same, a goodbye, maybe a family story. But instead, there was a photo. A baby, wrapped in a hospital blanket. And on the back, in familiar handwriting, was a single line, "He has a right to know, just like you did." I stared at Daniel, confused. "What is this?" His expression didn't change. "That's my daughter. Your cousin. She's 17. It hit me then. This wasn't just about a secret from the past. This was a chain reaction. Another generation caught in the same silence, the same mistakes. And just like that, I realized the story wasn't ending. It was starting again. For a long time, none of us spoke. The photo sat in my hand like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My grandfather looked up at me, his eyes no longer filled with fear, but something closer to acceptance. Maybe this was the moment he'd been running from his whole life. Not just the secret, but the consequences. The generations affected by one decision, one night, one silence that lasted too long. Later that evening, Daniel and my grandfather talked privately. I sat on the porch, thinking about how easily our idea of family can shift. I had come to spend a quiet weekend with the man I thought I knew best, and was leaving with a whole different understanding of him, of myself, and of what it means to carry someone's story. Before Daniel left, he handed me his number and said, "If you ever want to meet her, just let me know. She's curious about you." I nodded. I didn't have all the answers yet, and maybe I never would. But I knew this family isn't always neat or simple. Sometimes it's full of shadows and complicated truths. But even in those truths, there's a strange kind of peace. Because at least now we know. That night, my grandfather sat beside me and said softly, I should have told you sooner. I should have told everyone sooner. I just looked at him and said, you're telling me now. That's something. And it was. That night really did change everything I knew, not just about him, but about life, choices, and the stories we leave behind. E1.